but he didn't get overwhelmed by not knowing the full picture. So I think you just need to make sure that you're happy to go step by step.
So if newcomers have this fear before they start an e-commerce business, Lewis, how would you suggest that they can overcome that fear?
Well, I think the first thing is to assign fear the correct label. If you label fear as this like stop sign that you must stop, you should not proceed, then that's exactly how it will present. But if you can realize that fear isn't necessarily a stop sign, it's more of a give way sign. It means pay attention, don't act too hastily, baby steps at this stage. And instead of worrying about, I should not proceed, just think, I've just got to pay more attention here. I've got to be alert to the potential dangers and take baby steps. It's like, instead of looking at the entire journey and worrying so much about, I've got to know the full picture start to finish before I do anything, just focus on the next step. It's like driving at night. Your headlights in the car, they don't show the whole path ahead. They just show you the next few meters, don't they? And so then that's the way that you continue driving. But sometimes once you have the right people by your side, you do at some point have to just jump in, because I think you can delay and you can overthink and you can procrastinate, and eventually there comes a point where you do just have to say, I'm doing this, I'm committing. Recently I was on holiday in Greece and it was a little bit chilly, and we had a pool that was fairly cold. It wasn't heated, I don't think. And one of my sons desperately wanted to go swimming one morning. Now, I knew that the pool was pretty cold, and I knew that if he went and dipped his foot in the pool, he'd say it's too cold and that would be it. He wouldn't want to swim. But I also knew that if he just jumped in, he'd be absolutely fine and we'd have a great time and he'd enjoy swimming. So I didn't give him the option. I didn't say, go and test the water first, then tell me if you want to swim. Instead, I just held his hand, and then we counted from sort of 3 down, and then we just jumped in the pool. And he initially screamed. He's like, Dad, what have you done to me? And it's absolutely freezing. But then within a few seconds, he's laughing, he's throwing him around, and he'd forgotten it was cold, and we had a great time, right? And it's the same in business. When we over-prepare and we overthink and we try and plan for everything, we're like, I'm going to need to put a thermometer in the pool first to detect whether the temperature's optimal for swimming. We're over-analyzing, and when the time comes, we just either got to make that jump or we're not going to do it. It's easier when we're doing it with someone else that's already knowing how to swim. If someone else is there with us jumping into the pool, or is already in the pool and says, come in, it's fine, once the temperature adjusts, right? That's like joining a community. But they say, yeah, it's scary at first, but jump in and you'll be fine because we're all in here and it's working well, right? So I think a thought exercise that's quite helpful, that hopefully will help you if you want to try to reframe fear a little bit, is just take note of it and think, in years to come, this moment that I'm experiencing fear in right now will be an incredible, amazing, exciting chapter to tell as part of my own entrepreneurial story. So imagine your life as a movie, and this scene right now of the fear will be something that you'll be able to tell your children, your grandchildren in years to come. You are the lead character in this movie. And what that does is it kind of helps remove you from the events and the emotion, and you get to see it almost like a third party watching in, and you see it as this scene in a movie where you're the main character. And it's a useful exercise to be able to think, I'm not defined by this moment and this fear. This is just another chapter on my journey to success.
Yeah, and that exercise reminds me of having the thought about, what would I do if I absolutely knew that I would succeed? And just reframing that in your mind and realizing that, you could go after something with the absolute certainty of success. How would you go about things differently if you had that complete certainty? And similar with that question about zooming out and looking at yourself going through a difficult time before you get started, zoom out a few years and realize that that was all part of the journey before you got started and took the necessary actions to get to the success you have. So take away that fear by having that guarantee of success. And of course, getting around other people can help you get to that success. And it reminds me of that pool story you were explaining, Lewis. I was on holiday recently as well in Greece, and my girlfriend and I, we were laughing around the pool because it's quite amusing actually watching everyone get into the pool that's not a heated pool, and everyone has the exact same reaction. And often there's a couple going in together, and perhaps say he goes in first, he puts his toes in, and he just jumps in because he realizes that there's only one way to get into this. And then he looks back at his partner and she's doing the same thing. And they always have that same expression where they first realize that the fear of the cold. But the partner who's already in the pool, they always say the exact same thing. They say, it's fine once you're in. And it's so true. And eventually that persuades the other person in the relationship to jump in, and they realize that it is absolutely fine once you jump in. And you need somebody perhaps to have already gone in to tell you that it's fine once you jump in, to have been through that fear and done it anyway, and use that to inspire you to take action as well. So once people perhaps have got over that fear and they've gone into dropshipping, what would be the next steps that they can take to really propel and accelerate their success?
Yeah, well, firstly, just being aware of the attributes that make dropshipping the ideal business model in this scenario. Focus on its strengths and know that dropshipping allows you the flexibility, the scalability, and the buffer room to be able to make some mistakes and it be quite a forgiving business model when you get started, certainly more so than a lot of more traditional business models and other types of e-commerce. Remember as well that you don't need the full picture. I think this is something that really holds people back because they feel like they need to have all the answers to all of the steps. There's a reason why we work through it sequentially in a 6-week program. It's because the stuff that happens in week 6, you don't need to know about it in week 1. And if you did, it would probably be overwhelming. So we just provide that information as and when it becomes necessary to you. I went out for a run this morning before we were filming this podcast, and for anyone that doesn't know, we film these podcasts early morning. So I went out for a run and it was pitch black outside, and I needed one of the, the chest running lights that you wear that kind of lights the few paces ahead of you, and it illuminates your next few steps and obviously makes sure that cars and stuff can see you as well. And it just kind of reminded me that I don't need to see the entire road, the entire path, everything that lays ahead. I just need to know where I'm running and make sure I don't trip over and make sure that people can see me as well. And so it's the same with business. You can't get overwhelmed by all of the steps that lay ahead. There's a funny story actually that it reminds me of my granddad. Years ago, we had these Christmas tree lights that were wrapped around, the ones you wrap around the Christmas tree. And every year they get taken down, they get stuffed back in a box, put in the attic. And they were so tangled that we looked at them and I was like, oh, just throw them away, buy some new ones. They're complete, that will take someone all day to untangle them. But my granddad was challenge accepted. And he just sat there in his armchair and just dismantled, untangled this web of overwhelmingly tangled spaghetti Christmas wires for hours, literally hours. Just sat there all day and untangled them. And imagine if he'd sat there when he first looked at those and said, well, I'm only proceeding if I can see exactly how the knot was formed and exactly how to untangle it now. He'd have never got anywhere, right? But because he didn't get overwhelmed by needing to have the full picture, he just did piece by piece, untangled knot by knot. And eventually he ended up with the full lights in one long piece. And we were amazed at how he'd got the whole thing back into one long line, but he didn't get overwhelmed by not knowing the full picture. So I think you just need to make sure that you're happy to go step by step. The other thing is embrace mistakes as lessons as you go. Remember that they're kind of the tuition fees that you pay for the school of experiences. That's part of the process. Remember the main character analogy. Look at yourself as a main character. Imagine if you were going to succeed, what would you do? What would the path be to get you to the point of being a business owner up and running? And don't try and do it alone. Don't try and work on a desert island because you're making things so much harder for yourself than you need to. If you try and say, I'm doing this as a lone ranger, I'm out there on my own. There are other people right now, today, working from home like you, from their laptops, and you can surround yourself with a positive community of people who can be your bumpers in the bowling alley. They are the people that will stop you bowling into the gutter because they've done it before. And if you can have that supportive team there to keep you on track, that can make all the difference to your success or failure.